Welcome to a new segment we're doing here on the Conscious Strength channels, MAHA Wins of the Week. Pretty self-explanatory. We'll look at the news of the week, fighting against big ag, big pharma, and fighting against the destruction of our health as a society. So, topics of this week include some mega food corporations actually doing some pretty good things with announcements of theirs, taking ingredients out of their products and investing money into regenerative agriculture. We also have some news on vaccines. The CDC's ACIP panel made some new recommendations this week that big pharma and the vaccine industry won't like. We also have a piece of news on a pro-autism vaccine researcher who was arrested for stealing $1 million of grant money from the CDC. Interesting backstory behind this one we'll get into. And then Rand Paul lighten up Fauci, because Fauci was illegally hiding data from Congress. Interesting. So let's start off with the food companies. First off, Tyson Foods. Tyson Foods is a big meat manufacturer. They own companies like Jimmy Dean's and a few other sort of big box mass marketed meat brands. They announced this week that they're taking out high fructose corn syrup out of their products by the end of the year. So that's within 3-4 months. And in their press statement they put out, they're not just removing high fructose corn syrup, but they're also taking out sucralose, artificial sweetener, very common artificial sweetener. Also BHA and BHT, which are preservatives, pretty nasty preservatives too, you find in a lot of boxed cereal products. And they're also removing titanium dioxide, which is a common colorant. It is a white pigment that is put into a lot of supplements to turn the capsules white. It's also put into a lot of foods to act as a coloring to make it white as well. So I am impressed by this one. Granted, I'm not going to go out and be buying Tyson Foods products anytime soon because the meat is probably still factory farm sourced. But I'm impressed by this because, earlier this year, RFK Jr. said he was banning food colorings and then giving companies until late 2026 to remove the food colorings from their products. Then you had a bunch of companies come out and put out PR statements saying, we're removing food colorings from our products. And the internet got all happy and said, oh, this is amazing. But the thing is, they're required to do that by law. So big whoop, put out a PR statement, get some pats on the back for your brand, but they have to do it by law anyway. So I haven't been impressed. It doesn't impress me. These companies are removing food coloring because they have to do it anyway. But Tyson Foods doesn't have to remove high fructose corn syrup or sucralose or BHT from their products, but they're deciding to do it anyway, and they're not waiting until the end of next year to do it. They're doing it within 3 or 4 months. So actually, I'll give Tyson Foods some props for this one. Granted, I will wait to see if they don't just replace these toxins with other toxins in their products, right? We're going to have to keep checking their ingredients and see if they actually do purify what they make. But I'm impressed by this one. Wait and see though if they follow through with it and they don't just replace poison with poison. Then let's get to McDonald's. I'm impressed by McDonald's with this one as well. Again, I'm not going to go out and be buying McDonald's products because of this. Still a lot of other issues with it. But McDonald's announced that they will be investing $200 million into regenerative agriculture. And they're working with an organization from the USDA to invest that $200 million across 38 states. And basically, it looks like they're giving this money to their beef producers. And these beef producers are going to be able to use that money to expand the grasslands that their cows graze on. They're going to be using it to conserve water as well, update the watering around these grazing areas, to improve soil health, lessen the amount of fertilizers and pesticides that are used on the feed for the animals. So it looks like this is actually going to be a pretty solid investment that McDonald's is making into regenerative agriculture that will lessen the need for chemicals sprayed onto our planet, sprayed onto our crops. So not only a win for our health, if we can get those pesticide poisons out of our food, but also a win for the health of this planet. So again, McDonald's didn't have to do that. They weren't required by law to do that. So we'll also give McDonald's some Little quiet golf claps for this one as well. So props to Tyson and McDonald's for that. Still would like to see a lot of improvement with what they make, but step by step. Now let's get into MAHA Action. This is a nonprofit, 501c4 nonprofit called MAHA Action. And because of all of the attacks RFK Jr. has been getting in recent weeks, last week RFK Jr. was in front of a Senate subcommittee and he was being attacked, grilled by not only Democrats, but Republicans too, because left, right, there's plenty of people on both sides of the aisle that have plenty of money they're getting from Big Pharma, and they're either dumb or compromised, so they're not looking out for the health of the public, they're just looking out for their donors and companies that fund them. So because of all the attacks RFK Jr. has been getting in recent weeks, this nonprofit, MAHA Action, on September 27th, which is a week from tomorrow, next Saturday, they're going to be holding demonstrations across the country in about little over a dozen cities. I haven't seen the list quite yet, exactly where these demonstrations are going to be, but they're going to be holding demonstrations in support of RFK Jr. and the MAHA agenda. So when I come across exactly where they will be holding these counter protests, if you will, protesting the attacks on RFK, supporting RFK. When I come across that list of where they're going to be, I will post it on the Twitter, Telegram, Instagram accounts for Conscious Strength. So be on the lookout for that, or sign up to the email list on the website. There's that news. Next, let's get into some of the vaccine stuff. So remember earlier this year, the ACIP, Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, it's called. It's the organization under the CDC that does all their vaccine recommending guidelines. Earlier this year, RFK Jr. fired all 12 people on that panel. All of a sudden just fired them. And then he has since replaced all those people with much more honest, science-friendly people. Some vaccine questioners, people who aren't just bought and paid for by the vaccine industry. So Big Pharma didn't like that. Mainstream media doesn't like that. And over the past couple of days, September 18th and 19th here, this ACIP panel has been meeting to update their vaccine recommendations. And there are a few recommendations that they have updated that are good news for MAHA folk. So one of those recommendations includes no more universal recommendations for the COVID-19 vaccine. They're also delaying the MMRV vaccine to a few years, so young infants aren't going to get them recommended from the CDC anymore. They also stopped recommending the Hep B vaccine at birth, which was always a contentious issue because the main way Hep B is spread is through sexual contact. It's basically an STD, so why are we giving a newborn baby, literally their first day of life, a vaccine for Hep B? The people who question vaccines have always questioned that one, rightfully so, and now the CDC is no longer recommending that. So wins for MAHA, bad news for Big Pharma with the new ACIP recommendations. Staying on the topic of vaccines, let's talk about this pro-vax autism scientist arrested for wire fraud and money laundering. Allegedly, he stole $1 million in grant money from the CDC. So there's a little bit of backstory behind this one. The story is that he was actually indicted in 2011. So he was indicted 14 years ago. But when he was indicted, he skipped the country. His name is Paul Thorson, if I'm getting that right. He skipped the country and went and hid in Denmark for over a decade. And Denmark never extradited him or did anything about it. Now we're learning that back in June, so just a couple of months ago, he was arrested by German authorities, Interpol authorities. He was finally arrested, and he is set to be extradited to the U.S. to face trial and be sentenced. And he is alleged to have stolen $1 million in grant money from the CDC. Now, why this is even bigger and why we are calling him a pro-vax autism scientist is because he was a co-author on a big paper that's usually touted by Big Pharma, mainstream media, and pro-vaccine lovers. This was a 2003 paper that claimed there is no link between mercury-based thimerosal vaccines and autism. So he was a co-author on that 2003 paper that claimed no link between thimerosal and autism, which, bullshit. Now, 2003 paper, 2011, he was indicted for stealing allegedly grant money from the CDC. He went on the run for 14 years. He was just arrested, and he's set to be extradited to the US soon. And I find it really coincidental that, of all times, he was just arrested and is set to be extradited now, this summer, effectively, when we have all this debate raging at the mainstream level with thimerosal and how it plays into autism. So that's a biggie. That's a biggie. Timing is interesting there. A couple more things. Rand Paul is still on the hunt against Fauci. Probably one of the few senators, people in Congress who don't seem to be bought off by Big Pharma is Rand Paul. Rand Paul might even be subpoenaing Fauci soon, but he's trying to get Fauci to testify in front of Congress. Fauci probably won't, so Rand Paul will probably send him a subpoena. But Rand Paul is going after Fauci because new evidence has surfaced that Fauci was literally telling his colleagues to delete emails and delete correspondence with Fauci pretty much at the beginning of COVID. Back in 2020, throughout 2020, Fauci was sending emails to his colleagues and talking and then telling them to delete that evidence. And that evidence never made its way to Congress, which it should have. So Fauci might be facing some legal troubles for that. And Rand Paul might end up subpoenaing Fauci to force Fauci to testify. So that's the piece of news with that one. And then lastly, RFK Jr. held a press conference with Attorney General Pam Bondi earlier in the week. And they announced that near Chicago, they seized 50 semi-trucks of illegal Chinese vapes. They all came from a warehouse in Chicago, and they were all illegal. So there you go. A lot of drugs pouring into this country. That is one of them. So that is our MAHA news of the week. Good stuff from these mega companies. I would like more. We'll see if they stick to their guns and actually mean what they PR say, but good stuff from Tyson. Actually, good stuff from McDonald's. Never thought I'd be saying that. The CDC's ACIP committee updated the recommendations. Pharma won't like that one. And then we had that pro-vax autism scientist arrested. So that's it for this week. I'll see you guys next Friday. Appreciate you watching. Subscribe to this channel, and we will continue these MAHA wins of the week videos.